Welcome to the Veterinary Rehabilitation Podcast, where we aim to help fellow veterinary rehab therapists increase their knowledge and elevate their practice. I'm Megan Kelly.
And I'm Anae Lloyd. Together, we bring you the latest insights, research, and information in the field of veterinary rehabilitation.
This podcast is brought to you by Onlinepethealth, a leading continuing education membership for veterinary rehabilitation therapists. With Onlinepethealth, you'll have access to a wide range of online resources to help you stay up to date with the latest techniques, advances, and trends in the industry.
Our podcast features in-depth conversations with leading experts in veterinary rehabilitation. They share their own experiences and knowledge to help you improve your practice. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out in the field, our goal is to provide you with the tools and the insights you need to succeed.
So join us as we explore the exciting world of veterinary rehabilitation and help you take your practice to the next level. Hey veterinary rehabbers, today Annalie Saunders from the Canine Conditioning Coach joins Anae to dive into the topic of puppy exercise. Now, it's a complex subject and there's no one-size-fits-all or clear-cut guidelines, but the key is to ensure long-term health in these puppies and reduce injury risk. And one of the things mentioned was to keep them as lean as possible from a young age. Now, when we think about keeping puppies busy, we're always thinking about physical exercise, but mental stimulation can be just as tiring. And while exercise is beneficial, we want to make sure that we don't do too much high-impact activity because that can increase the risk of joint disease. Annalie and Anae focus on talking about building postural strength and control to support the puppy's growth and well-being. You're really going to love this conversation. I'm so excited. There are 11 days to go until the Vet Rehab Summit. This is our annual online veterinary rehabilitation conference. This year, we're tackling the ethical challenges faced by vet rehabbers. So I'd love to invite you to join us on the 31st of August. We're diving into the specific ethical dilemmas. We'll have the opportunity ourselves as vet rehabbers to define our own personal and professional boundaries around these. We're going to discuss how education and awareness can drive positive change in the issues that we care about the most. So you can get your tickets at vetrehabsummit.com. If you're an Onlinepethealth member, you get free VIP access. If you're not, you've got two options. You can either purchase a full access ticket at vetrehabsummit.com or you can sign up as a free limited access ticket holder. This actually gives you access to a live webinar called Placebo Treatments in Evidence-Based Practice, Ethical or Not Ethical. And if you're listening to this after the events, all the Vet Rehab Summit recordings are available in your Onlinepethealth membership. So before we head over to the chat, a quick word from our sponsor. Curacao Vet is owned by Nada Robinson. Nada first developed her courses at the Colorado State University, where she started the Medical Acupuncture for Veterinarian Certificate program in 1998. In so doing, Dr. Robinson developed a science-based platform for veterinary acupuncture, and that was the first of its kind. So today, Curacao Vet offers a comprehensive curriculum in integrative medicine with a rational, evidence-supported foundation. And the courses that they offer include medical acupuncture, photomedicine, botanical medicine, medical massage, and integrative rehabilitation. You can discover Curacao Vet at curacao.org, and you can also see them at this year's Vet Rehab Summit on the 31st of August. All right, over to Annalie and Anae.
Hi guys, and welcome. Hi Annalie, thank you for joining me.
I'm so glad to be here.
Awesome. Guys, so today we are chatting about puppy fitness or puppy exercise. I should have actually said not fitness. How much is too much? What advice do we give to dog owners, to puppy owners? And how do we traverse this really interesting topic of growth plates and fatigue and how much exercise and high-risk breeds for degenerative joint conditions and all the different things that go together with puppy exercise and how we try and advise and navigate these waters. So I'm really excited to have Annalie from the Canine Conditioning Coach back with us. It's been a while, so I'm really happy to have another chat with you, Annalie. Thank you for joining me.
I'm super glad to be here. And this is a complicated topic. You know, there are many factors going into it. And I think so many of the misnomers and misinformation that is out there start off well-intentioned, but take a complex topic and try and make it overly simplified. So I kind of want to address some of those misnomers and oversimplifications so that we can get to the bottom of what is what are the things we can do to help our puppies and prepare them well for life? And what are the things that we need to avoid to mitigate our risk of developing injuries and arthritis and things like that down the road? Because we all just really want to do what's best for our dogs.
Awesome. Okay, Annalie, so will you introduce yourself and introduce your interest in today's topic? So guys, we're chatting about puppy exercise and kind of diving into the complex waters of what we should and shouldn't be doing with our puppies.
So my background originally was in human fitness, specifically post-rehab fitness. So when people would be discharged from rehab from an injury or an issue, some pain that they were having post-surgery, after they were discharged from rehab, before they went back to their real life, oftentimes there was a fitness gap. And professionally, that's the gap that I filled for humans. And when my border collie ruptured her CCL, and we were discharged from rehab, and I was given the all clear to go back to do whatever she wants, which made me nervous, I noticed there was a gap there as well. And so that is the gap that I wanted to try and fill preventatively ahead of time with my Canine Conditioning Coach programs. And that's kind of what I wanted to link into and talk about today with regards to puppy fitness. What can we do to reduce the puppy's injury risk by increasing strength, improving body awareness, and making sure the puppy is nice and flexible to an appropriate extent? What can we do to reduce injury risk? And what do I need to avoid to make sure that I don't, by mistake, set my puppy up for injury long term? So pulling from my background in human fitness, I want to try and fill this gap preventatively in our puppies.
So I love that you are speaking about, prevention, because that really is, I think when we're thinking about puppy exercise, there are really two reasons why we want to understand it for a new puppy. One is that they are a breed that has a high risk of joint disease. So say we have a German Shepherd and we're worried about them developing hip dysplasia, or we have a Labrador and we're worried about elbow or hip dysplasia, or basically anything with labbies, sadly, or any of the other kind of breeds that are predisposed to degenerative joint disease. It's really good if you are getting a specific breed of puppy to educate yourself on what the risk factors are, the health risks are for that breed, if you're not familiar with them. But so as rehabilitation therapists, we're very familiar with those joint diseases. That's our kind of area that we're specializing in. And so I think for as rehab professionals, we're just triggered when we see a high-risk breed puppy doing things that we feel might increase their risk of developing joint disease. So that would be the one kind of group. And then the other group of puppies would be puppies with a purpose, right? They're going to be competing, or they're going to be working dogs, and you want to set them up for success. And those are kind of the two groups of puppies that we want to consider preventatively and as a preparation for life. How do we want to manage their exercise as young dogs? That's the same. You have the same kind of two groupings in your mind?
Yes. And while there are kind of two distinct groupings, we can manage them the same way. So Dr. Daryl Mills has a great blog post that is titled, What is the thought in not exercising puppies before growth plates are closed? And it's right there in his My Lame Dog blog. And what the evidence shows is the most important thing that we can do for group number one, the high-risk breeds, but also for dogs with a job, is to make sure our puppies are an appropriate weight. And not overfeeding, making sure that we are adjusting the caloric intake of our puppy to the needs of that specific puppy, which is going to be different for one individual within a breed versus another, especially in Labradors with that interesting new gene study that came out. But making sure puppies are not overweight, that's the number one protective mechanism that we can implement. And then second, avoiding some things while engaging in other things. And so what that article breaks down is what are activities that are high risk versus low risk. It's too simple to say safe and unsafe or good and bad. That's, again, too simple. So what is low risk and what is high risk? And risk is mainly determined, risk of injuring growth plates, the soft tissue around the joints, like the muscle, the tendon, the ligaments around the joints, the cartilage that protects the joints. The thing that affects risk the most is impact, which is force. So gravity force, like from a falling object, if a dog is like jumping off the back of a tailgate of a truck onto the ground. And then the ground reactive force, which is the energy imparted between that falling object and the ground, which is mainly determined by the stiffness of the ground. So a soft surface would impart less force, like grass, versus a hard surface. So force is the main determining factor between what is low risk and what is high risk. And so avoiding high impact is the most critical component with regards to implementing protective mechanisms for the joints. I know this is a lot. The other thing, which is crazy, that these studies showed is that some impact actually provided protective mechanisms to the joint cartilage and the bone itself. So we want to exercise our puppies with minimal to medium force while avoiding high impact. Walking and trotting for 1 hour a day, even in puppies that are skeletally immature, actually showed a protective mechanism. That it took quite a lot of running for extended periods of time, like a half or full marathon each day, to show degradation of the cartilage and the bone. And all of that information is much more eloquently explained in that blog post. So I encourage everybody to check that out.
I love that. I love that you said that you started with diet, because truly that is the, I think in terms of exercise guidelines, restrictions, all of that, for the most part, we're guessing. This is our best educated understanding and guess. But when it comes to diet, we know that, right? We know that you can prolong your dog's life, and you can reduce their risk of developing joint disease hugely if all you do is from day one make sure that they are an appropriate weight. And for puppies, really keep them lean. There's no reason they can't be a little bit on the skinny side. That's better than a little bit on the plushy side. Just keep them lean until at least 1.5 years, and then just keep them lean for the rest of their lives. Well, thank you.
Right, they lack the strength in their opposable thumbs to open the food container. So
exactly, it's all up to us as their owners, as their guardians, to keep them lean, and we can and we should. So I think that's really huge. So thank you for mentioning that, because I probably would have forgotten that really important thing. Because it's the one thing that we should be doing. So I love that.
For sure. And it's relatively simple in the environment of all of the things that we're doing. And, when I bring my puppies home, I start them on conditioning exercises right away. And I actually use all of their food for our training. So,
I love that.
So they are, building a bond with me, and I make sure that I'm not feeding excessive food from a bowl, because I'm using all of that to get in their, early puppy stuff, which kind of brings me to the next topic I'd like to talk about, is the concept of self-guided exercise versus forced, and I'm using air quotes, forced exercise, right? That self-guided exercise is explicitly safe or somehow safer, where guided or forced exercise is somehow unsafe or less safe, more damaging. And really, if we look at, I'll take my own puppies. If I look at what my puppies want to do on their own, sometimes that involves safe things, because remember, safe or unsafe is determined by force. So sometimes my puppies want to be smart and safe, and sometimes they want to be crazy and jump off the back of the stairs and crash into their older brother or sister. Sometimes that self-directed exercise can include force. And most of the time, in the type of conditioning that I participate in, that is low impact. It's slow, thoughtful movement. And so directed exercise or forced exercise can be safe as well. It could equally be unsafe if I'm asking my dog to participate in high impact activities, or even forcing them to participate in high impact activities that include non-slip surfaces or obstacles for them to navigate that they're not mentally or physically prepared for. So there is again, overly simplified distinction, trying to separate exercises into two categories: self-directed, being mislabeled as inherently safe, and forced exercise, which is being mislabeled as inherently unsafe. And again, that's like a mistake in categorization.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. It's kind of like especially when it comes to puppy exercise, we've kind of created these myths and these guidelines that we've just slapped as a blanket statement, and it isn't accurate, right? It doesn't actually correctly share the information or the message behind it. So I'd love to dive more into each of those areas, because for the future athletic dog, but also for the high risk joint disease dog, specific exercises, specific like training movements, postural control, body awareness, those kinds of exercises, strengthening the core, those are very good. They're beneficial, they're helpful, they set them up for success. They teach them where their bodies are in space. You're working with the nervous system. It ticks all the boxes.
For sure.
So that's fantastic. And then on the other hand, we have, like you said, self-directed exercise. And I want to throw in play, because play would fall into that category. And we underestimate how important that is. So I want to throw the opposite viewpoint in there, because again, this is our best educated guess. We can't really say what causes what yet. One day we'll have all that research and we'll understand it fully, but we know that self-directed play, it helps mental development, it helps social development, it helps fear and anxiety. It helps all those areas which many of our dogs today are lacking in, because they don't have the social exposure. They've been restricted from social exposure and from unrestricted play. Unrestricted play as little kids and humans looks horrifyingly dangerous to us, because they're just doing the worst things in the world. And yet they're not injuring themselves and somehow come out okay on the other end. And it's teaching them really important things in their nervous system and in their bodies that end up becoming protective.
Yeah.
It teaches them their limitations and their boundaries and protects them in the long run from injury. So cutting out uncontrolled play is also not beneficial,
Yep.
right? You need to figure out how to allow that play and strengthen the core, strengthen the nervous system. So I think it's definitely, there's a black and white answer for you guys, and we can tell you exactly what to do with your puppies.
Yes, exactly. Black and white. It's always the same, no matter what. No, but along with force, like we have talked about force and impact, the other dividing line between what is low risk and what is high risk, whether in the conditioning room or on the playground, is the dog's level of arousal, right? So that is another dividing line that we can use to separate low risk from high risk, is how aroused is the puppy. Now, let me just sidebar and say there is nothing wrong with teaching your dog an on switch, teaching your dog to move and operate in a high level of arousal. And many sport dogs actually need that. So arousal is not a problem, but over arousal, too much adrenaline, especially when we're talking about play or unstructured exercise, can be problematic, because the job of adrenaline is to reduce inhibition and to reduce pain signals. So, when we're talking about unstructured exercise, whether that's play in the backyard or play on a hike or playing outside in the yard by themselves with a jolly ball, which is David Rose's favorite activity, is how aroused is that puppy? Are they moving from appropriate levels of arousal into high arousal? And what does that look like for your puppy? Because when that starts to happen, the brain part starts to go away. And that's where injury and issue, increased risk happens, right? And so, yes, I want my dogs to play with my other pack mates, other safe dogs, but can they recall when asked? Can the dog separate and come apart? Can the dog come and take a break on the mat, or have they lost their impulse control to the point where they are no longer thinking? And I think that's the dividing line in the conditioning room and on the playground that we can use to separate high risk activity from low risk activity.
Okay, I really like that. So you're kind of looking for that arousal level, and when it gets to a point where the brain is switching off and they're no longer responsive, they're not paying attention to their environment, they're not aware of you. So those are kind of the things you could be looking at for that heightened arousal level. Yeah, I like that, and I relate to that with my children.
Right. And that's going to be different for puppies in different development stages.
Yes, yes, for sure. Okay, so Ashley, I love this question. So how can you get those benefits, right, from play when you don't have another puppy or an appropriate older dog for them to play with? I love that you've said an appropriate older dog, because not all older dogs are appropriate. If they're huge, much bigger in size, or they have really high energy levels with not great impulse control, that would not be a super great playmate.
Right.
So what would your recommendation be for safe play? Where do they find playmates? Ideally other puppies. Puppies should be with other puppies. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so I don't know 100% the answer to this, because I typically don't get another dog until my puppy is 4 to 6 years old. That's the spacing that I like. And I live in a really rural area, so I don't have puppy classes to attend. So I teach body awareness formally in the conditioning room and also play with my puppy. And so David Rose, my youngest right now, he is not super food motivated, but he is very toy and play motivated. So I've had to use a lot of pre-mac. Do something for me and I'll do something for you. So eat these cookies and then we can play with your toy. I've had to use a lot of pre-mac in our training. And so I use the skills taught here in the conditioning room, like foot targeting, square stand. Can you front foot target? Can you rear foot target? Can you ipsilateral foot target, which is both feet on the same side? Can you walk backward? Can you turn on in a circle on a plank? Can we play together in a way that makes your arousal level come up and then come back down? So I use the skills in the conditioning room to teach that type of enrichment, body awareness, interaction, because I don't often have access to puppies. And I think a lot of people, at least I found that when I took my puppies to puppy class, it kind of freaked me out a little bit, because with the puppies that I've had, they didn't love the full-on nose-to-nose, overwhelming puppy on puppy activity, that they preferred interacting with me, but watching that activity. And now that I live in the middle of nowhere, I don't have access
No, you don't have
to that anyways.
Okay, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. So from my side, I would say that if you don't have access to that kind of social interaction, and almost unstructured play that you would have with other dogs, that you're going to get similar effects in terms of the nervous system learning and mental stimulation from uncontrolled environments. So what I mean by that is you're going to go out for a walk in the forest, on the beach, in the dunes, in different environments, different surfaces, different they're going to climb over logs and climb through roots and engage with the environment, with an environment that is uncontrolled, in that it isn't one specific way. They're going to climb on logs and jump off of them and jump over them, and they're going to run into trees and things like that, where you're not controlling the space, the footing, the activity, but you're allowing them to engage with a novel environment in a way that feels good and right and exciting to them. And when we bring some of the conditioning exercises into those environments, we can again increase their body awareness, as well as the strength of those exercises, the strength of those cues, by asking for it in a different space, on different surfaces, engaging with the environment in a novel way. So a familiar exercise in a novel environment is going to give us that mental and neurological benefits. And I think that's so incredibly important for puppies, that we are continuously stimulating the mind and the nervous system, and not just getting stuck on the physical body.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that brings up an important point, that one is not better than the other, right? That both things in combination are actually what best prepares our puppies to have a well-rounded, physically healthy, mentally and emotionally happy life, right? We need both things. And that also might look like taking your dog around the cityscape if you don't have shade and trails and rocks and trees. That's okay too. That, walking on the sidewalk and benches and other people and noise, all of that also counts. And if we look at human child development, free play on the jungle gym at the park is important, but the humans who become the most coordinated are also those that are involved in sport of some kind. Now, when we swing that pendulum too far and we look at, 14-year-old girls who are competing at the Olympic level in gymnastics with lots of injuries, that again is too far. But for myself, I participated in many sports, ballet, gymnastics, all of these things as a growing human. And I came out the other side quite body aware, strong, addressing my coordination imbalances between my left and right side, being confident to move and jump and navigate through life, knowing my body can do it. On the flip side, I have one girlfriend whose mother, her entire life, always said, be careful. Be careful, you're going to fall. Be careful, you're going to hurt yourself. Be careful, be careful. So she never learned how to do monkey bars. She never learned how to ride a bike. She never learned how to use or trust her body. And as an adult, she lacks body awareness because that wasn't introduced. And I think the same thing is true for our puppies. So giving them the opportunity to, in an unstructured way and in a structured way, learning to use their bodies, that combination is really important.
I really love that. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, okay, let's Shelly, thank you for your comments. So Shelly says, love this conversation as I do games-based dog training that teaches I'm tongue-tied, sorry. Concepts like impulse control, calmness, etc. So this is right in line with how I train, and now just adding in fitness as a soon-to-be certified canine fitness professional. Woo! I love that. Okay, so I mean that story that you just told, it really resonates with me because I do think today we're not talking about kids, but it does relate, right? So many kids are essentially on activity restriction and like protective cage rest because we're living in really small spaces where it isn't safe to engage with the outside world and to just play and be wild, and parents that work long days and it results in children that are really not playing and engaging with the world and learning through that just free movement and without being afraid of falling or injuring themselves. Like, this is such a big thing. If I look at my smallest child is 1.5, and as he learned to walk, he threw himself on the floor. And I can't even tell you any other way. He would walk 2 steps and then face plant on purpose, continuously. Walk 3 steps, face plant. Walk 3 steps, face plant. And I just had to let it go because for whatever reason, that felt good to him and he just wanted to fall. He still does it and he's mastered running and jumping, but he still wants to face plant. So I think it's really important that we recognize there is purpose to that. And we can't let it go a little bit because their little undeveloped bodies are very well adapted to not injuring themselves when they're very little, to handling that kind of craziness. So Ansi, Play with Purpose, it's great to have you with us. Thank you for joining us, Ansi. And Ashley, thank you. All right, so Cheryl, I'm a dog walker and currently have 2 puppies on my books. The owners are strictly following the 5 minutes per month of age with their dogs. Are they being too protective? So let's talk about that. Let's talk about this. I would categorize that as one of the myths or one of the guidelines that have been created as a kind of safety recommendation. So what would you say to Cheryl?
Yes. So again, I really believe this rule came from a very well-intentioned place, right? We're trying to take a complicated topic and make a simple, easy to follow guideline for the maybe first-time dog owner to follow. I do think it is too restrictive, not necessary. The data doesn't seem to show that that's needed, but there is wisdom on like erring on the side of caution to a certain extent. And so 5 minutes per month of age, what are we talking about? 5 minutes of, right?
What?
And of what exactly? And I've heard it a few different ways. 5 minutes of structured exercise. And this is something else that I want to get into with regards to working in the conditioning room. How much is too much? 5 minutes of working on a singular dog training skill for an 8-week-old puppy is probably enough, right?
Mm.
Because the mental fatigue starts to kick in before the physical fatigue, right? So 5 or 10 minutes working on one single skill in the conditioning room is probably enough. Now, can my 8-week-old puppy go for longer than a 10-minute walk? For sure, right? Because that doesn't require the same kind of mental control that working for 10 minutes on a dog training skill does, right? And so it kind of goes back to that dividing line of how much arousal, how much fatigue is happening for the puppy mentally. Because if the dog is overstimulated mentally and the dog is on a walk and they are biting the leash and charging to the end of the leash and hitting the end of their harness and barking and biting your pants and starting to behave in a way that's overly aroused, or starting to lag behind, doing shade seeking behavior, wanting to lie down, and you have to pull the puppy, either of those things, regardless of if it's 5 minutes or 60 minutes, is showing that it's too much for the puppy.
There's such variation in breed
Yes.
capacity that it's really difficult to just make this rule across the board,
Right.
right?
Right.
What feels good to a border collie does not feel good to a chihuahua or a bulldog.
Yeah.
It isn't the same
Yes.
thing that we can apply. So I love that you've brought in the kind of self-guidance from the puppy, which is really important. If they're getting tired, that's enough. If your
Right.
puppy
Enough.
wants to rest, they should rest. If they want to run, let them run. And then looking at those arousal levels. So what feels good to the puppy? What do they love doing? Engage in those activities and allow them to rest when they're ready to do so, when they want to do so. And I think what is happening with the rest of the day as well, if your puppy is restricted for the rest of the day, 5 minutes is not enough. 10 minutes is not enough. 20 minutes is not enough, right? Then you're looking at a very different picture. So what does their day look like? Are they outside in the yard? So are they essentially regulating themselves the whole day, and then you come home and you want to take them for a 10-minute walk, or you want to do 10 minutes of training or conditioning? I think it's really easy if you're doing conditioning to pay attention to when do they start to fatigue.
Yep.
Because you're paying close attention to those cues already. So that's really nice and very easy. It's more difficult if we're going out for a walk, especially if you're on lead and if you're, for example, in the city, right? It's a little bit easier if you're going on a walk in the forest and you're off lead and they can explore their environment. You can watch them. It becomes easier to gauge what their arousal level is and how they're moving and what kind of activities they're seeking. So it completely depends on all of those factors.
Yeah.
What kind of dog do you have? What is their day structured like? And what is the activity that you're trying to regulate, that you're trying to figure out how much is too much? So that's a really good question. Thank you, Cheryl, for sharing that. Do you have anything to add to that?
Well, the only one thing I would add is sometimes it is important to enforce rest, even if the puppy doesn't want to rest, right? So Ron Burgundy, my working lab, he, when we go on a hike off leash, he sprints ahead of us on the trail until he gets to a curve, at which point I give him his recall cue. He sprints back to me as fast as he can to get his one kibble. Then he sprints as fast as he can to the curve and then sprints back. So if we're doing 5 miles, he is easily doing 15 miles. So even though he doesn't want to rest, when I start to notice, and he is 4 years old now, so he is no longer a puppy, but this happened even when he was a puppy, I still enforce break time because the ability of his ability to self-regulate, I can tell is starting to go away. So I want to preemptively impose rest, which is just a cue that I have taught, which means says stay back, which means stay behind me on the trail and like come down a little bit. So sometimes puppies will not want to rest, but it's still a good idea to enforce that rest. That's the only other thing I wanted to add.
Okay, no, I love that, and I definitely don't disagree with you. High drive dogs, right?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So I can see. Thank you for joining us. Sorry. You can see I'm a bit tongue-tied. I can see a lot of puppies with bad posture running around. In your opinion, how often is it just bad posture caused by only imbalanced muscle development, let's say caused by slippery surfaces, instead of early signs of some serious issues going on? That is a very loaded question.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, your thoughts on that, Anna?
Yes. This is actually a fantastic question. And the solution, the test to determine if this is a one-off posture, unusual, weird posture that the puppy is engaging in because of outside factors versus something that is inherent or ingrained in their nervous system, the solution to that, the test is, what does the dog do in the conditioning room? Right? So when the dog is provided appropriate surfaces, appropriate guidance with regards to where their feet should be, that they are at an appropriate level of arousal, we take them out of a candid setting and put them into a structured setting. Can they load bear equally on all 4 feet? Can their spine and back line be neutral? Can they maintain a square sit with the rear toes facing forward and the rear limbs held in neutral alignment or not? Right? When we see in the conditioning room that they can when asked, that's when I kind of brush that off as the dog, being a little unusual. But in the conditioning room, if when asked, when they are provided all the resources necessary, if they are still offloading, if they are still showing poor posture, if they are showing the inability to maintain neutral alignment, that's when my sixth sense, the warning bells start to go off in my mind that diagnostics may be in order, because we can't control the variables in the real world. Was that a head bob, or does she have a thorn stuck in her foot, right? Like, was she sidewinding with the rear, tracking to the side of the front feet? Was that happening because she was pulling on her leash and the pressure of the harness? Or is that a muscle imbalance between, one side or the other? Or is she avoiding loading one rear leg? So we can test all of those things through structured exercises. And that's actually one of my favorite uses for conditioning exercises is to test my hypervigilance. Like, am I seeing a real thing or am I seeing a make-believe thing?
I love that so much. And thank you. I mean, this is the huge benefit for me of having this kind of conversation with a professional in an adjacent field, because the way that you see the question and the way that I see the question, our approach is different, right? And how we're going to test that out is different. So I think, so Tati says, I understand, very understandable and logical reasoning. Thank you very much. I love it as well. You're spot on. And for me, there's more to the clinical picture, right? Posture is generally a flag. It means we want to have a look at what's going on. So puppies will go through different developmental phases where they'll have long back legs and wonky angulation, and mostly that's normal, and we need to let them go through those phases of development. But what is the whole clinical picture? Are there behaviors that are also red flags? So do we have a German Shepherd who does not like to, you come home and your puppy's not jumping on you, right? That's weird. We can untrain the jumping, but they still want to do it.
Yeah.
So if you're seeing, and it can be so subtle in high risk breeds, high drive breeds, these behavioral changes can be tiny, very minute. We should consider them as flags and look at the whole clinical picture. The breed, what is their age? So if you're seeing postures that are kind of making you think, should I look at the elbows? Then that's going to be at a certain, it's going to be somewhere around 6 months, 9 months. You'll start seeing that a year and a half. But if the elbows are an issue, it's going to be in those age, those certain age groups. So look at the full clinical picture. It's really difficult to just see a puppy out in the world and then judge there's a problem there. And we want to, as professionals, we love doing that, but we don't have enough information. And so without bringing them into the conditioning room or properly doing a workup and looking at the full clinical picture, it's difficult. But in general, yes, posture should be an indication that you need to have a second look. It should be one of the first things that say we should slow down, we should evaluate what's happening. Let's try and look at all the puzzle pieces and see what's going on. So that would kind of be my perspective on that.
Yes. And posture changes are behavior changes.
Yeah.
Right. And so if we are talking about a puppy who has always moved in this way in the real world or in the conditioning room, and that posture, which is behavior, right? Posture is a physical demonstration of your muscles behaving differently, right? If there is a behavioral change, absolutely. I would always recommend getting a workup, getting a hands-on evaluation done, because if you're seeing that posture, which is behavior, that postural change, and you have a good baseline, that is the first sign that something can be going on. And I will also say, get video to show your veterinary professional, because again, adrenaline suppresses pain. So the picture shown in clinic when the dog is aroused from the car ride, from the waiting room, from going into the back, is going to be different for your clinician. So give them the best chance of making an accurate assessment by providing actual data, not just in-clinic assessment.
I love that. Okay, Ingrid, great question. Thank you. So do you suggest regular dogs, meaning dogs not meant to be sport or working dogs, get orthopedic testing as a puppy? I have agility dogs, so it was no question to have them tested, for example, for hip flexibility at 16 weeks. But do you say necessarily for all dogs?
I mean, my opinion is yes. I think that's my opinion. I know people have different limitations with regards to financial resources and logistical resources. Like, I live in a rural area. I have to drive quite far to see a board certified orthopedic specialist. But I do believe that having an accurate picture of your puppy sets you up as the handler, as the caregiver, as the guardian, to provide the best possible care with regards to what exercise the puppy does, what exercise the puppy avoids, what types of, joint supplements the puppy is on, even to the point of, something like JPS surgery, which is a surgical treatment of hip dysplasia that needs to be done before 20 weeks in most breeds. Having an early assessment of puppies, I think, is very important. I would say critical, for me. Because the other thing is, then your clinician gets a baseline of your puppy so that they're not meeting your puppy the first time when you think your puppy is hurt.
Yeah.
Right. So yes, I think all dogs.
All dogs. Okay, so for the benefit of having the different viewpoints, right? I'm a very conservative human. So for like personally, I wouldn't be having surgery on a puppy that's immature, but those surgical options are available. And if you are a surgical person, getting the exam done early means you have the options. Otherwise, you don't have the options. So for hip dysplasia, yes, there are very good surgical options that are available to young dogs. So if you have a high risk breed and you want to have that option, you go for the exam early. What was I thinking now? So if we're talking about dogs that are not going to be competitive or working dogs, does that mean we're talking about dogs that still have a high incidence of degenerative joint disease, like Labradors and Shepherds? Then yes, it's beneficial again to have that early assessment. But what I think is important is, like you said, having that relationship with your veterinarian, having your dog conditioned to go to the vet, to not be stressed and anxious in that environment, to have to have it be a safe place. Those are huge benefits. And a lot of clinics that offer puppy assessments are set up in a way that it is a really positive experience. And so you're not just going for, one evaluation. You might go over a series of weeks or months. It's really fun for the puppy. It's positive. You're checking different things at different time points. There are big benefits to doing that are not limited to finding orthopedic issues early. And so there are benefits to that. So to kind of simply answer your question, I would say no. I wouldn't, put a blanket thing on all puppies should go. But all puppies should see their vet. And any puppy that is a high-risk breed, you should be aware of the risks for your dog. And you should take proactive action to be prepared, to know what the risk factors are, and to be looking out for them so that you can intervene early. And if you know that you're going to be open to, surgically intervening for hip dysplasia, then you do that because it gives your puppy the best chance. For elbow dysplasia, you should, if you see any kind of forelimb lameness, get your puppy to the vet as soon as possible.
Or shoulder OCD, there are a lot. And the other thing is, yes, for high risk breeds, but also dogs of unknown origin, right?
Yeah.
So typical rescue where you don't know the parental heritage, how well fed the mother was, what the first 8, 12, 16, 20 first year of life, those dogs also really, I think, deserve a baseline assessment to make sure there is nothing going on. Because the average pet dog owner or even sport dog owner sometimes doesn't see the early clinical changes.
The other benefit is that you are creating a relationship with your healthcare professionals. And when you have a good relationship with them, they understand you, they're in your corner. It's much easier to go through things that are niggling or worrying you than it is if you're a stranger walking into the clinic. They don't know who you are, and you don't already have that relationship. So highly recommend it. Definitely. Got you. Okay, so Alex, thank you for joining us. 95% of exercises I teach also become assessments for that dog. And why form is so important, because if one day they can do a squat sit with equal pelvic limb function in good form, and the next day they can't, then it's a flag that something is not right for that dog. So I love that. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is especially true, like Alex mentions here with a squat sit, is if there is a change in behavior, that change in behavior means something, especially in the context of a known exercise, right? The dog knows what they're supposed to do. They have demonstrated that they can do it in the past under these conditions, and then suddenly they're not, right? That means something. And if you're dealing with a hypervigilant handler like me, where I think I see something all the time and it makes me a little neurotic, I can also calm myself by saying, okay, my dog just did 30 repetitions, so 3 sets of 10 perfectly without having one hair out of place. I can probably relax a little with regards to thinking something is catastrophically wrong, right? So it can be used as an assessment in both directions.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. Okay. I think damage can be done by the use of inappropriate equipment, especially in puppies, for example, harnesses. Can you share what your opinion is on this? That is a very good question. Thank you.
Yes. So definitely equipment, any use of equipment. And when equipment was first mentioned, initially I thought, inflatables in the conditioning room, because that's where my brain goes with regards to equipment. But we're talking about harnesses here, and harnesses, collars, inflatables, any of that can be damaging if force is involved. So with regards to inflatables, if the dog is jumping off the inflatable, if the inflatable is rolling and sliding away, causing the dog to fall down, if the dog is running on the leash and hitting the end of the leash and plowing into the harness or collar, of course that can cause harm. But typically only when force is involved. Now, having a well-fitted harness that doesn't restrict movement for your individual dog is important. But really, assuming the harness is well fit and there's not force involved, I wouldn't say that using a harness would be damaging as far as my scope is concerned. And the same thing is true with inflatables in the conditioning room, or using high heights like a climb in the conditioning room. There's nothing wrong with that as long as we are compensating for too much force.
Okay, no, I like that. I think you've covered it. A harness needs to be well fitting and not restricting movement. And if that's the case, it's not restricting over the shoulders. That's very common. So the harness design plays a very big part in that. We want them to be able to move freely and unrestricted through their bodies. But the other part of that is the training part is, are they responsive? Are they pulling? Are they treating the equipment? Are they disregarding it completely?
Right.
Because then that is a problem, but that can be solved through training and not by changing the equipment. Changing the equipment won't solve the problem. So that would be the kind of differentiation for me. So I
agree.
We can take a few more questions, and then I can't believe we're almost at an hour.
I know. Time flies when you're having fun.
It does. Keith, so what general recommendations, think 3 bullet points, might you make for a group class of very beginner pet puppy owners when discussing appropriate exercise guidelines? Most of our clients fall somewhere in the spectrum of exercising their puppies until they're flat as a pancake, or not exercising them at all as they've been told not to.
Yes,
Great.
yes. Totally great question. And I agree with the assessment that the sometimes in an attempt to do our best, we go to the extremes, right? That my puppy is a monster unless I throw the ball for them 5,000 times, or wrapping my puppy in bubble wrap so that they don't get hurt at all, right? And of course, neither extreme is appropriate. And so 3 bullet points. So the first thing I would talk about is how mental fatigue can help drain energy. So that would be the first thing that I would explain to a group of first-time pet dog owners is if your puppy needs a big energy dump, do some body awareness training, do some go to your mat training, do some thing in a thing training, which is a friend of mine, Sarah, is one of her go-tos. Can you put this thing in this other thing? Teach your dogs lots of dumb, cute tricks, because that mental stimulation dumps as much energy as physical stimulation. So 1, mental training. 2, yes, do exercise interspersed with, I'm going to use air quotes, obedience training. So can you run around in the backyard with the other dogs, and then can everybody do a downstay for 5 minutes, being rewarded appropriately? That interspersing physical activity with training is another good way to help the dog regulate. Again, what we've been talking about is that arousal, so that our physical exercise is lower risk. And then third, I would explain about impact, how jumping down, sliding to a stop, running into other dogs, running into the fence, falling over, tumbling, how it's the forces involved that can increase risk. And so those 3 things, so mental stimulation, integrating training with physical exercise, and reducing impact to reduce risk. Those would be the 3 things that I would really emphasize.
I love that. And let's go back to thing number 1 that we mentioned at the beginning, which is your body condition score and diet, which is really the biggest thing that we know can impact all of them.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's like the blankets. Yes. And then
yes.
And then they always want
under that umbrella
control,
For sure.
Let's add those in. All right. Thank you, Annalie.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the subscribe button so you get notified every time I load a new podcast. I'm here every week talking to vet rehab therapists from all over the world about all things vet rehab. A big thanks to our sponsor, Curacor. Their sponsorship allows us to be able to give this podcast to you for free. So please go and check them out at curacor.org. Don't forget to bookmark the next Vet Rehab Summit. It's on Saturday, the 31st of August, 2024. Come and be a part of the world's largest online veterinary rehabilitation conference created specifically for you, the vet rehab community. Online Pet Health members get VIP complimentary access to the Vet Rehab Summit. For more information about continuing education for vet rehabbers, you can go to onlinepethealth.com.